Have you ever felt invisible to someone who should see you, really see you? It's a chilling feeling, isn't it? Like you're standing right in front of them, shouting at the top of your lungs, but they're looking right through you as if you were a ghost. Maybe it's your partner, your parent, or even a close friend. The weight of their indifference can be crushing. Have you ever poured your heart out, only to be met with a blank stare, a dismissive wave, or worse, complete silence? It gnaws at your soul, doesn't it? Makes you question your worth, your presence, your very existence in their lives. You start to wonder if you're asking for too much, needing too much, being too much. We've all been there in some capacity. That gut-wrenching feeling of being overlooked, undervalued, and ultimately unseen. It's a vulnerability that cuts deep, leaving scars that can take a lifetime to heal. Think about a time you shared a triumph, a moment of pure joy, with someone you loved, only to have them shrug it off as if it were nothing. Or perhaps you confided in them during a moment of intense pain, only to have them change the subject or offer empty platitudes. It's like showing someone a vibrant, hand-painted portrait that you created with all of your heart and soul, only to have them glance at it for a second and then ask where the bathroom is. All of the color, time, emotion, and creativity that you poured into that art piece suddenly feels worthless. That feeling of invisibility. It's not just about being ignored. It's about feeling like your emotions, your dreams, your very essence are insignificant to someone you hold dear. It's the quiet pain of existing on the periphery of their attention, always longing for a connection that remains perpetually out of reach. It's a silent scream in a crowded room, unheard and unacknowledged. In these moments, we begin to doubt ourselves. We start to question whether our feelings are valid, whether our needs are legitimate, whether we are worthy of love and attention. The seeds of insecurity and self-doubt take root, and slowly, insidiously, they begin to erode our self-worth. We feel as though we are slowly fading away, becoming translucent. You might be thinking that this sounds a little too familiar. And maybe you are dealing with a similar situation right now, or perhaps have dealt with it in the past. It leaves an ache that lingers long after the moment has passed. You start to think, am I the problem? Am I asking for too much? Is this relationship even worth fighting for? These questions can consume you. The uncertainty becomes a constant companion, whispering doubts in your ear. The feeling of being invisible can slowly chip away at your spirit, leaving you feeling lost and detached from the very people you should be closest to. Is there any coming back? But what if I told you that you're not alone? What if I could show you a story about a woman who felt just like this, unseen, unheard, unappreciated, by the one person who should have cherished her the most? A story of a relationship teetering on the brink, a relationship where one person's needs were consistently overshadowed by another's indifference. This is a story about Sarah, a waitress working in a local diner, and the unsettling encounter she had with a rich Mexican man who tested her patience and ultimately her sense of self-worth. It's a story about the corrosive effects of power imbalances, the subtle yet devastating impact of emotional neglect, and the difficult journey of reclaiming your voice when someone has tried to silence it. Over the next few minutes, we are going to unpack this explosive interaction between Sarah and this wealthy patron. I'll break down the unspoken power dynamics, the subtle digs, the dismissive behavior, and the gut-wrenching feeling of being treated as if you're less than human. I want to show you how Sarah navigated this incredibly difficult situation, how she found the strength to stand up for herself, and how she ultimately delivered a comeback that left everyone speechless. More importantly, I want to give you the tools and insights you need to recognize these patterns in your own relationships. Whether it is with a partner, a family member, or a colleague, it is important to identify when you are not being seen or heard. I'll demonstrate how to assert your needs, set boundaries, and reclaim your sense of self-worth when someone tries to diminish you. This won't just be another story about workplace drama. This is about something far more profound. The universal human need to be seen, heard, and valued for who we are. This is about the insidious ways in which power and privilege can distort our perceptions, leading us to overlook the humanity of those around us. This is about the courage it takes to speak truth to power, to stand up for yourself even when your voice is shaking. I promise that you will feel validated and feel a cathartic release in witnessing Sarah's incredible strength. As you listen to Sarah's experience, I want you to ask yourself, have I ever been made to feel invisible? Have I ever been dismissed or devalued by someone I cared about? What can I learn from Sarah's story that can help me navigate similar situations in my own life? So get ready, because this is not just a story. It's a mirror reflecting the challenges we all face in our quest for authentic connection. It's a chance to learn, to grow, and to discover the incredible power that lies within each of us to stand up for ourselves, even when the odds seem stacked against us. It all starts with a simple question. Have you ever felt invisible to someone who should see you? Following the lingering question about feeling invisible, let's dive into a moment that still makes my stomach churn. Have you ever felt like you were just part of the background, a ghost in your own life? That's precisely how I felt that day. I just wanted to get through my shift. My life wasn't glamorous. I was a waitress at a local diner, a job I took to make ends meet. The diner was nothing special, just a place where people came for cheap coffee and greasy food, but it was my livelihood. Each day felt like running on a treadmill, the same routine, the same faces, the same orders. That particular day started like any other. I woke up tired, dragged myself out of bed, and put on my uniform. The diner's atmosphere was already buzzing with the early morning crowd when I arrived. Construction workers grabbing a quick breakfast, office employees fueling up with coffee before work, and the usual regulars gossiping in their corners. I tied on my apron, plastered on my best customer service smile, and started taking orders. The emotional weight of knowing you're simply a means to an end for someone is a heavy cloak, isn't it? And that's how I felt, nothing but a mechanical doll to serve the whims of others. Then he walked in. You could tell from the cut of his suit alone that he was someone of means. His Rolex glinted under the diner's fluorescent lights, and the air seemed to subtly shift as he entered. He surveyed the room with a dismissive glance before settling into one of my tables. Just another day, I thought, trying to squash the unease that prickled at the back of my neck. I approached his table, notepad in hand, forcing a smile. "Good morning, sir. What can I get for you?" His eyes scanned me from head to toe, not in a friendly way, but as if I were an object to be assessed. My skin crawled under his gaze. "Bring me your best coffee," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "and make it snappy. I don't have all day." I nodded, trying to ignore the way he made me feel like I was beneath him. As I turned to get his coffee, I couldn't shake off the feeling that this was going to be one of those customers. You know the kind, the ones who treat service staff like they're invisible, or, worse, like they're inferior. Bringing him the coffee, I managed to keep my hands from shaking. He took a sip, his face unreadable. "This is weak," he announced, pushing the cup away. "Get me another one. And this time, make it strong enough to wake the dead." A knot formed in my stomach. I could feel the other customers watching, their conversations quieting as they sensed the drama unfolding. I took the coffee pot and went back to the counter, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. It was just coffee, but it felt like so much more. It was about respect, about being seen, about not being treated like I was less than human. As I returned with a fresh cup, I overheard him on his phone, boasting about a business deal. He laughed loudly, flashing a smug smile. As he ended the call, he pointed at me with a dismissive wave. "You know?" he said, his voice cutting through the diner's chatter. It's people like you who make this country what it is. Grateful to have a job, right? Earning every penny, I'm sure. His words were a slap in the face. The other customers gasped, their eyes widening in disbelief. I stood frozen, every ounce of my being screaming in protest. I wanted to disappear, to become invisible, to melt into the linoleum floor. However, something inside me began to stir. I was tired of feeling small, tired of feeling unseen, tired of being treated like I was worthless. The air in the diner hung heavy with tension, a palpable sense of injustice filling the space. It was like watching a pressure cooker about to burst. That sense you get when you're witnessing a situation inching toward a breaking point. This wasn't just another rude customer. This was a moment where my self-worth hung in the balance. Have you ever felt that tipping point within yourself where you simply refuse to tolerate disrespect any longer? A moment where the fear of speaking up is eclipsed by the need to reclaim your dignity. Because now I was about to. That breaking point. It's visceral, isn't it? It clings to the inside, a burning ember refusing to be extinguished. For me, it arrived with the force of a slamming door that day. His crude remarks about my coffee, his flaunting wealth, those were stinging nettles. But his final comment, the one about my supposed gratitude, that was the hammer blow. It wasn't just about the bad coffee or even his arrogance. It was about the unspoken assumption, the invisible wall built on prejudice that he hid behind. Have you ever felt seen and yet unseen, all at the same time? I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I wanted to disappear behind the coffee machine, become invisible. But then a different kind of heat flared up inside. Not the shame, not the humiliation, but pure, unadulterated anger. It wasn't just about me any longer. It was about the countless other women, the countless other people of color, who had endured this quiet torture of condescension disguised as generosity, of prejudice masked as polite conversation. It was like being trapped in a play where I hadn't been given a script. The lines were all wrong, the tone jarring, and the other actor, this man, was improvising a narrative that cast me in the role of the grateful subordinate. His words were a subtle poison, seeping into the atmosphere, telling everyone within earshot that I should be thankful for the crumbs he tossed my way. His wealth was a shield, seemingly giving him permission to demean me subtly, confident in the social hierarchy that he believed protected him. The problem wasn't his money, it was the way he wielded it, as a weapon, a tool to subtly remind me of what he perceived as my place. It was the assumption that wealth equates to superiority, and that my job, my race, somehow made me less of a person. The sting of his words was amplified by the silent agreement I felt from some of the other patrons. They were watching, judging, complicit in the small drama of humiliation unfolding before them. It created a bubble of discomfort, an unspoken tension that seemed to settle over the entire diner. I was being pushed into a corner, not just physically, behind the counter, but emotionally, spiritually. This feeling, this particular brand of helplessness mixed with rage, is a burden many people of color carry daily. It's the weight of expectation to be agreeable, to be docile, to swallow the microaggressions disguised as compliments or just jokes. It's the tightrope walk of navigating a world where your worth is constantly being questioned, where your very presence can be seen as an inconvenience, a disruption to the established order. Imagine a glass of water slowly being filled drop by drop. Each condescending remark, each dismissive glance, each subtle act of prejudice is another drop. Eventually, the glass overflows. My glass was overflowing. It wasn't just about the coffee or the tip or the job. It was about all the times I had bitten my tongue, all the times I had smiled when I wanted to scream, all the times I had minimized myself to make someone else feel comfortable. It was about breaking that cycle. It's not that I hadn't encountered rudeness before. Working in customer service, it's practically a job requirement, but this felt different. This wasn't simply about a bad mood or a demanding customer. It was laced with something deeper, something far more insidious. A sense of entitlement that came with his wealth, tinged with an undertone of racial condescension. It was the look in his eyes, the slight curl of his lip as he spoke to me, as if I were something unpleasant he had found on his shoe. I realized that my silence was permission. Every time I swallowed my anger, every time I forced a smile, I was reinforcing the idea that this behavior was acceptable, and I simply couldn't do it anymore. Something had to change, starting with me. I had allowed myself to be diminished, to be made small, to be treated as less than equal. And in that moment I decided that I would no longer participate in my own degradation. That night, sleep offered no escape. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the scene in the restaurant, the subtle yet sharp sting of his words, the way my forced smile felt like a betrayal of myself. It wasn't just about one bad customer. It was the accumulation of countless interactions where I had swallowed my pride and dignity for the sake of, what? A slightly bigger tip? A fleeting moment of perceived peace? I realized then that I was slowly eroding my own self-worth brick by brick, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I couldn't continue down that path. The next morning, the weight of that realization hung heavy in the air as I got ready for work. It felt like I was preparing for battle, not just another shift. My reflection stared back at me, and I made a promise to the woman in the mirror. Today, things would be different. Today, I would stand up for myself. It wasn't about being aggressive or confrontational. It was about reclaiming my voice, setting boundaries, and refusing to be treated as anything less than a human being deserving of respect. The mere thought of it sent a shiver of mingled anticipation and dread down my spine. When I arrived at the restaurant, the familiar atmosphere felt charged with a new kind of energy, my own. I walked with my head held a little higher, my shoulders squared, a quiet resolve hardening my gaze. When I saw him walk in, my heart pounded in my chest, but I focused and I breathed. I wanted to run, to hide, to pretend he wasn't there. But I didn't. I had to show myself that I could stand my ground. I walked up to his table with a notepad in hand, ready to take his order. His eyes flickered with what I could only describe as surprise, as though he hadn't expected to see me again. "Good morning," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "What can I get for you?" He began to launch into his usual litany of demands and condescending remarks. But this time, something snapped within me. It felt like a dam had broken, releasing a torrent of pent-up emotions. I interrupted him, my voice calm but firm. "Sir," I said, "I need to stop you right there. I understand you're a customer, but that doesn't give you the right to speak to me in a disrespectful manner. I'm here to do my job, and I expect to be treated with the same courtesy you would offer anyone else." Udi! The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. His face flushed crimson, and he sputtered for a moment, clearly taken aback by my unexpected defiance. He tried to recover, to bluster and assert his perceived authority, but I held my ground, my eyes fixed on his. I understood that sometimes people behave the way they do because they've never been challenged, never been held accountable for their actions. It was time for him to face the consequences of his choices, and it started with me refusing to participate in the charade any longer. My reasons were simple. I was tired of feeling small. I was tired of internalizing the negativity and allowing it to chip away at my soul. I deserved to be treated with respect, and I was no longer willing to compromise on that. It was as if, for the first time, I truly understood my own worth. I had allowed their behavior to affect me because I had not realized how much impact it had on my emotional well-being. It was like I'd been watering a toxic plant in my own mind, and I finally decided to uproot it. and throw it away. Standing up for myself wasn't just about that single moment. It was about breaking a cycle of self-degradation that had been running for far too long. It was about taking control of my own narrative and refusing to let others define my worth. It was about recognizing that my voice mattered, that my feelings were valid, and that I had the right to assert my boundaries. It was a declaration of independence from the prison of self-doubt and people-pleasing. People in relationships must stand up for themselves, and this was my chance to show him, and more importantly myself, that I would. The shift in the air was palpable. It went from an awkward transaction to something sharp, something dangerous. Where I had initially felt disbelief, a slow burn of anger began to rise. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about respect, about being seen as a human being, not a caricature. Imagine a balloon slowly inflating with resentment until it stretched to its limit, ready to burst. That's what I felt like. His annoyance was a match thrown into a dry forest. What began as a civil, albeit strained interaction, quickly spiraled into a confrontation fueled by entitlement and prejudice. The subtle digs about my race and socio-economic status, veiled as jokes, became increasingly overt. Each comment was a tiny pinprick, deflating my patience. I remember the exact moment when the switch flipped. It was when he sneered, "Someone like you wouldn't understand the value of hard work." The words hung in the air, heavy with condescension. It wasn't just an insult. It was an attempt to invalidate my existence, my struggles, my very being. All of this because I wouldn't bend to his unreasonable demands. Have you ever felt cornered, like an animal trapped in a cage? That's the level of intensity I was feeling. I had two choices: cower and accept his abuse, or stand my ground and fight back. For too long I had chosen the former, but something inside me had finally snapped. The anger had given way to clear resolve. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice dangerously low. "What did you just say?" Those few words were like a dam breaking. He launched into a tirade about the ungrateful poor, the lazy minorities, the usual garbage spewed by those who believe their privilege entitles them to treat others as less than human. Each word was like a slap in the face, but instead of recoiling, I stood taller. How do you deal with someone who believes they're superior to you? It's not about winning an argument, it's about asserting your worth, drawing a line in the sand and refusing to let them cross it. It's about refusing to internalize their poison. This wasn't about the restaurant or the bill anymore. This was about all the times I had been made to feel small, insignificant, invisible. This was about breaking that cycle. It was an out-of-body experience. I saw myself, a young black woman, standing defiantly against this man, a symbol of wealth and power, and I felt a surge of pride. No longer would I shrink, no longer would I apologize for existing. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was now tempered with a sense of purpose. It was the fuel I needed to stand my ground, to speak my truth, to demand the respect I deserved. I realized that the battle wasn't just against him. It was against all the voices that had ever told me I wasn't good enough, wasn't worthy, wasn't enough. I felt a burning need for him to see me, really see me, not as some stereotype, but as a person. Had he ever been in a situation like that? Had anyone? What is the emotion someone's eyes display when they feel threatened and cornered? The more he spoke, the clearer it became that his anger stemmed from his inability to control the situation. I wasn't playing the submissive role he expected, and it infuriated him. He wanted me to cower, to apologize, to validate his superiority, but I refused. My refusal was a mirror, reflecting his own insecurities and prejudices back at him. As he escalated, the silence around us grew heavier, the air thick with unspoken truths. What was I going to do to end this for good? As his tirade intensified, I felt a chilling wave of isolation. It was more than just embarrassment. It was a profound sense of being utterly alone in the face of injustice. Each cutting word felt like a lash, not just directed at me, but at every person who had ever been judged based on prejudice. The weight of his gaze, heavy with disdain, pinned me down, making it hard to breathe, to think, to even hope. It wasn't just about the spilled drink anymore. It was about the unspoken power he wielded, the assumption that he could demean me without consequence. My hands trembled, and my vision blurred, not from fear, but from a deep, aching sadness that anyone could treat another human being with such blatant disregard. The other patrons seemed frozen, caught between the discomfort of witnessing such a scene and the fear of becoming the next target. I felt like a solitary tree in a storm, bracing against the relentless wind, waiting for it to pass, but unsure how much longer I could withstand it. Was this how it ended? Would I simply shrink, apologize for existing, and let him walk away, emboldened by his cruelty? Then a voice cut through the toxic atmosphere like a shard of glass. "That's enough!" It wasn't a shout, but a firm, resonant tone that commanded attention. I looked up, my eyes still stinging with unshed tears, and saw a woman standing a few feet away. She wasn't young, maybe in her late 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that held a quiet strength. She wasn't physically imposing, but her presence radiated an unwavering sense of conviction. She was an unexpected lighthouse in the storm, offering a beacon of hope when I felt lost at sea. "I have been watching you," she said, her voice steady and unwavering. "Your behavior is appalling. This young woman made a simple mistake, and you are using it as an excuse to unleash your own prejudices and insecurities. It's disgusting." Her words, clear and precise, landed like hammer blows, each one dismantling the wall of arrogance he had built around himself. It wasn't blind rage, but a controlled, righteous anger that demanded respect. I felt a surge of warmth spread through me, chasing away the icy dread that had gripped my heart. I was no longer alone. Someone saw me, not just as a waitress, not just as a black woman, but as a person deserving of basic human decency. He sputtered, his face turning an even deeper shade of red. "This is none of your business, old woman. Stay out of it." The contempt dripped from his voice, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He was used to intimidating people into submission, and this woman's refusal to be cowed clearly rattled him. The air shifted. The power dynamic, once so firmly in his favor, began to waver. "It is everyone's business when someone is being treated with such disrespect," she retorted, her gaze unwavering. "We all have a responsibility to stand up to injustice wherever we see it." She turned to the other patrons, her eyes sweeping across the room. "Are we going to let him get away with this? Are we going to allow this kind of behavior to become normalized?" A ripple of unease spread through the restaurant. People shifted in their seats, their faces reflecting a mixture of guilt and resolve. The silence, once oppressive, now felt pregnant with possibility. Other customers began to nod in agreement, some murmuring their support. One by one, they started to voice their disapproval of the man's behavior. A young man stood up, his voice trembling slightly, and said, "She's right. This isn't okay." Another woman added, "We all make mistakes. He's way out of line." In that moment, the restaurant transformed. It was no longer a place of passive observation, but a community standing against intolerance. Like a dam breaking, a torrent of support flooded over me. A weight lifted from my shoulders, and I could finally breathe freely. The man, now facing the collective disapproval of the room, began to shrink. His anger seemed to deflate, replaced by a sheepish embarrassment. The power he had so arrogantly wielded moments before had vanished, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. This unexpected alliance was like finding an oasis in a desert, revealing a path forward I never knew existed. It wasn't just about the immediate situation. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always the potential for hope, for kindness, and for the unwavering strength of human connection. After that rich man was exposed, a profound silence washed over the restaurant. But it wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of understanding, of shared experience, of newfound solidarity. You see, what happened next wasn't just about me. It was about all of us. It was about recognizing ourselves in the face of injustice and choosing to stand together. It was about breaking a pattern, a cycle of indifference that often allows such behavior to thrive. Before that moment, I was just a waitress, a face in the crowd. The other patrons were simply diners, going about their evening. But in that instant, we became something more. We became a community bound by a shared sense of outrage, a shared commitment to decency. It was as if a spotlight had been shone, not just on the man's behavior, but on the connective tissue that binds us all. We were no longer strangers. We were allies in a common cause. It was like witnessing a garden suddenly bloom after a long winter, where before there was just frozen ground, there was now vibrant color bursting from the earth. The initial shock and silence gave way to a low murmur, a collective hum of disapproval that grew steadily louder. People started speaking out, not just in my defense, but in defense of basic human dignity. They questioned the man's behavior, challenged his assumptions, and made it clear that his actions were unacceptable. There was Mrs. Rodriguez, who always came on Tuesdays for lunch, gently taking my hand and saying, "You didn't deserve that, Mija." There was the young couple on their first date, who looked at me with wide, sympathetic eyes. And even Mr. Henderson, the stern-faced regular whose smile was as rare as a blue moon, offered a curt nod of support. These small gestures, these simple acts of kindness, meant more than words could express. For me personally, the shift was profound. I'd always believed in the power of community, but I'd never experienced it so viscerally. It was as if the weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. I was no longer alone in my struggle. Others saw what I saw, felt what I felt, and were willing to stand with me. That sense of validation, of belonging, was transformative. It gave me a renewed sense of strength, a renewed sense of hope. The experience was far beyond a simple exchange in service. It became a lesson in empathy and shared resilience. I noticed the rich man, who humiliated me, slowly shrinking, not physically, of course, but in stature. The energy he projected began to dim. His arrogance seemed to deflate like a punctured balloon. He was no longer the center of attention. He was an outlier, a pariah. The collective disapproval of the room was a force he couldn't withstand. He tried to maintain his composure, to bluster and deny, but his voice lacked conviction. For the first time, he seemed unsure of himself, aware that his actions had consequences. What surprised me was that many people who had remained passive during the initial confrontation later approached me privately to express their support. Some apologized for not speaking out sooner, explaining they were caught off guard or unsure how to react. Others shared stories of their own experiences with prejudice and discrimination, creating a bond built on shared vulnerability. How many more people were there who experienced similar abuse in silence? What was so hard about standing up when it's happening? This unlikely alliance wasn't just about that one incident. It spoke to something deeper, something more fundamental about the human spirit. It showed how easily we can connect when we recognize our shared humanity, how quickly we can mobilize when we witness injustice. It was a reminder that even in a world that often feels divided, there is always the potential for unity, for compassion, and for the unwavering power of solidarity. It reminded me that the invisible threads of empathy can bind us together in ways we never expect, transforming individual experiences into collective action. And it all had turned out well. So after all that happened, after feeling the sting of humiliation and witnessing the unexpected wave of support, I'm left with a profound sense of hope. It's a hope rooted in the realization that even when facing injustice, we are never truly alone. The simple act of standing up, of refusing to be silenced, can ignite a spark of solidarity that transforms individual pain into collective strength. Remember when the rich man thought he had won? Turned out that he diminished himself, and all of us who stand for what's right stood taller. That incident turned into a bright day after all. Many even came to me in private afterwards and told me some stories of similar incidents. And that made me realize this situation is more common than I thought. But like any good story, this isn't just about what happened to me. It's a reminder that even in a world that often feels divided, there is always the potential for unity, for compassion, and for the unwavering power of solidarity. It reminded me that the invisible threads of empathy can bind us together in ways we never expect, transforming individual experiences into collective action, and it all had turned out well. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment where you felt compelled to stand up against injustice, even when it felt daunting? Have you ever been in a situation where you felt belittled, discriminated against, or unfairly treated, and found the courage to speak out? Or from the other side, have you ever witnessed such an incident and felt moved to offer your support, whether publicly or privately? What happened? How did it make you feel? What was the outcome? In those moments, do you also feel this surge of emotions when you stand with someone and diminish the stature of the wrongdoer? Maybe it was a time where you challenged a microaggression in the workplace, confronted a bully in your child's school, or defended someone being harassed in public. Perhaps you offered a kind word to someone feeling down, reported unethical behavior, or organized a peaceful protest. No act of defiance is too small, and every voice matters. Share your stories in the comments below. By sharing your experiences, you not only empower yourself, but also inspire others to find their voice and stand up for what's right. Your story could be the catalyst that ignites change in someone else's life, showing them that they too have the power to make a difference. Every story, no matter how small it seems, is meaningful and has the power to influence people. If any of this sounds at all relatable, you are not alone. So, share your story, now to inspire others. Create a ripple effect of positive change. The more stories we share, the stronger our collective voice becomes. And don't forget to like this video, to show your support, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories and discussions on social justice, personal empowerment, and creating a more compassionate world. By liking and subscribing, you help us reach a wider audience and spread the message of hope, unity, and the unwavering power of solidarity. And it helps us create more content too. Also, share this video with anyone who needs to hear these stories or has stories of their own. By sharing, you're also helping them. What's coming up next time? Before, I may have unconsciously equated the two, believing that material possessions were a sign of accomplishment and worth. But now, I see that true wealth lies in the relationships we build, the contributions we make, and the legacy we leave behind. I am thankful for the support I received, and I am dedicated to paying this support forward in whatever way I can. I will continue to speak out against injustice, to challenge inequality, and to advocate for a more compassionate and equitable world. I know that the road ahead will be long and difficult, but I am optimistic about the future. Because I believe in the power of human connection, the resilience of the human spirit, and the unwavering potential for positive change. I choose to believe that even amidst the darkest of times, hope can always prevail. I choose to believe that by working together, we can create a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, and where the invisible threads of empathy bind us together in a tapestry of shared humanity. Thinking about it, it all goes back to a sense of shared humanity and active pursuit of justice for an equal playing field.